Residential real estate abounds with myths and misconceptions, most of them perpetrated by politicians and others with a vested interest in having people believe something that's not really true. And the greatest fallacy of all is that property investors are a privileged class with massive tax and other advantages that distort the market and cause problems like poor affordability and the rental shortage. In reality, the opposite is true. Property investors are seriously disadvantaged and discouraged in so many ways, with more and more of them having opted out of owning investment properties, which is why we have a chronic shortage of rental properties at the moment. The fallacy about property investors having big tax advantages, which should be disallowed, was repeated recently by Everybody's Home, a coalition of organisations that includes the Salvation Army and National Shelter, which proposed the rather horrifying scenario that everyone who rents in Australia should be living in social housing. Under their proposition, private renting would no longer exist, and the 1/3 of Australian households that rent will be living in social housing. Now, given that 90% of the dwellings that people currently rent in Australia are provided by private mum and dad investors, this is a rather radical, nation-changing quantum shift in the real estate landscape. Everybody's Home justifies this rather wacko idea by claiming that property investors are massively advantaged by negative gearing and a capital gains tax concession. But the opposite is true. Relatively few property investors access negative gearing benefits, and there is no capital gains tax concession, just a method of calculating capital gains tax, which incidentally is an impost paid only by investors, never by homeowners. Indeed, capital gains tax is one of many examples of ways in which property investors are quite seriously disadvantaged. Investors pay taxes that homeowners don't pay, namely that capital gains tax, but also land tax, which increasingly is a major deterrent to investment. Now, some states, particularly Victoria, have introduced new taxes and charges to further alienate investors and make the rental shortage worse in that state. Investors also pay higher interest rates than home buyers, although there's really no practical reason why that should be so. And investors also pay higher council rates and water rates than homeowners, and higher rates of insurance than homeowners typically do. Indeed, the system is so loaded against property investors that it's miraculous that anyone would undertake it at all. And in fact, it's that very long list of factors where property investors are disadvantaged that has created the worst rental accommodation shortage in the nation's history. But if the disconnected individuals at Everybody's Home have their way, it will become immeasurably worse. There will be no private rentals in the market at all. Everyone will be renting from the government or from international corporations.